Yeah, just a player update. Mo Isom is recovering. He had, trying to remember where we were last week when I spoke, but he had bacterial infection in his ankle. It was actually the same as strep throat, except it was in his ankle. Um, so he had to have a scope to clean that out. And then he has what's called a PICC line, which is a permanent IV, where 3 times a day he has to get intravenous medication to help fight that infection. And he's been working hard at, I guess the work they do on the ankle is just to keep it from getting stiff and work some of the swelling out of it. It looks a lot better than it did several days ago. His attitude's been terrific. And Tevin Mack and Kerwin Roach are going to miss one more game. They'll miss our opener on Friday. And then they will be back for our second game, which is a few days later.
Questions, just raise your hand, please. We'll come around with a mic to you. Dennis in front, please.
Coach, especially now with Roach out, how much are you liking what you're seeing from Andrew at point? I know he's young, but your early impressions.
Yeah, as I said last week, we're going to need to play that position by committee, I think, all year long. I don't know that we'll get to the point where we have one guy like we did last year with Isaiah, who when he's in the game, the ball's always in his hands. I thought Andrew did some really good things in the scrimmage. He still has a lot of room for growth, for improvement. You know, my thing with him, just like with all of our guys, particularly our young guys, is, you know, understand we think that you can be a phenomenal player. We think that you have a chance to be just terrific here at Texas. But in order to get to that point, there's going to be a level of accountability and a standard at which we're going to have to hold you on some of the small things and some of the details that, you know, maybe weren't as important before you got to college. But I'm really pleased with his work ethic and the way that he's responded in practice.
Mark, here, front left.
Yeah. Would you play those 2 point guards together at times?
Oh,
Same
yeah.
lineup?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to play. All of our guys will play together. I mean, we literally don't have any guys on our team where it's like, okay, if this guy's in the game, then this guy can't be in the game. And particularly our perimeter guys, I mean, those guys are going to be very much interchangeable this year. So, you know, you'll see a lot of different lineups with multiple guys at different positions.
Bob in front.
When's the last time you had entered a year with a team with this much youth that was going to play this many minutes, and what's the biggest challenge in developing them month by month?
Well, I've never, as a head coach, coached a team where the freshmen played quite this much, but this is the best freshman class that I've had the chance to work with as a head coach. Knock on wood. Hopefully they continue progressing. They've got a long way to go. I mean, that's the exciting thing is those guys are doing a lot of good things, and they can be so much better with growth and maturity and experience. So my third year at VCU, the year after we went to the Final Four, we had a really young team. It was more a matter of inexperience than, you know, having like freshmen that we're going to have to play so much like we have this year. But, you know, whether it's inexperience or youth or both, it's just a matter of learning with each opportunity, each time out. Our guys have been very competitive in practice, which is good. The question early in the year is always carryover. You know, can you take the things you're doing in practice, can you carry those over? Because what happens is, this happened last year, it happens with a lot of teams, is sometimes you get in the game and you lose your mind a little bit because you want to do well so bad, and you plan the game out in advance. Okay, when the game starts, we're going to get the opening tip, we're going to throw it ahead, I'm going to hit a three, then, you know, I'm going to get a steal, run out, get a dunk. And, you know, I remember that I did the same thing. You just kind of plan it out, and then it doesn't necessarily go that way. And you have to be able to respond.
Ryan in front.
Shaka, you know, Eric has mentioned a couple times that he wants to be the Isaiah of this team, for lack of a better term. You know, the guy who takes big shots, who is the big guy in the moment. Is he capable of that? Is he ready for that? And do you want him to be that?
Well, I don't think anyone's going to be exactly like Isaiah was, but that doesn't mean that you can't be, a big moment guy. Eric can be as good as he wants to be, but Eric needs to understand there's a set of things that go into being the best you can be, and he also needs to know that to whom much is given, much is expected. So, if you want all these things, and this is as a player, as a coach, as whatever, then you've got to be willing to do what goes into that, and that's not just in the game. That's in practice. That's in preparation. That's in the way that you treat your body. I think Eric needs to continue to get in better shape. That's something that he and I have talked about, and to do the things, all the things he wants to do, the fitness level that's required is very, very high because it can be fatiguing. But yeah, he definitely has it in him. I think that sometimes what happens with guys when you have a very good freshman year, he was on the all-rookie team. There's sometimes an assumption that, hey, I'm going to take this huge jump, but it doesn't just happen on its own. Now, he's had a good offseason. He put a lot of work in. He put a lot of time in. But now it's a matter of continuing to try to align himself with our plan and with his teammates, because as much as anyone, he needs his teammates.
Roger in front.
Shaq sounded the part of a leader after the game the other night, and I know he's got the young guys to work with, but when you see guys turn into leaders, do you see it? Is it something that yeah, that guy's a leader, or they force it sometimes? How does that kind of work itself out?
Well, I think leadership is something that it can't be artificial. It can't be I've never been big on, just, okay, we're going to announce our captains. That stuff needs to organically come about. And, one of the things that's interesting that I'm still learning about our guys is who do you respect on this team? Whose voice do you really listen to? What carries the most weight? And Shaq is a guy that, from my perspective, his voice does carry a lot of weight. Guys respect him. He's older. Guys joke about how much older he is, but he's a guy that's been around. He's played college basketball in multiple big-time conferences. He's seen a lot of things, and he's earned, I think he and Kendall have both earned a reputation of being very unselfish and being about the team. And our young guys would really do well to take from that example and try to learn from those guys.
Center front left.
Shaka, how does the lack of an experienced point guard, how does that change your approach as far as practice?
As far as the press?
Practice.
Oh, practice. It just means, we try to simplify. I think some of the things that we're doing, we have to teach certain things that you maybe take for granted when you have older guards or guards that have been doing it longer. You have to make sure that you don't, again, take for granted that they understand something that a year from now, some of those guys will know certain things that we're having to emphasize and focus on over and over in practice. It means you got to go slower. We don't have as many plays in as we had last year at this time. You got to do a little bit less, but if we can do less better, then I'll take that. So we just got to keep getting these guys as many reps as we can. And one of the things in practice, Cedric, that we're really trying to figure out is, can we get as much as we possibly can out of practice and out of trying to improve and grow these guys on a daily basis without running them down to the point where, we, for instance, starting on Friday, we have 3 games in, I think, 7 days. So, just making sure that we're smart about bodies and about energy.
Dustin in front.
Kind of piggybacking on Roger's question, how much does that leadership dynamic matter when you have a younger group? And now that you've been with these guys for like a month of practice, Have you learned anything that you didn't think you'd learn, or where are they at in terms of that growth and that progression?
Well, the leadership matters a great deal. I think it's among the 2, 3, 4 most important factors on your team. You know, if we have a group of guys that at one point or another figure out that they are going to set the tone for how our season's going to go, then we're going to have a lot better chance to be successful than if we've got a bunch of guys that just kind of go through the motions of what we ask them to do. They're very, you know, they show up on time, they practice, they do what you ask them to do, but that's not what it's about. It's about, can you get a group of guys who have a common purpose and want to do something together. And so leadership obviously plays a big role in that. The best leader that I ever coached was a guard at VCU, and he was unbelievable he would take the whole team, the coaches weren't around, and he would say, this is what we're doing. Or he would say, this is this is what we're not doing. And everybody just did what he said. And that was really way more powerful than anything that I could do as a coach. I know those guys don't come around a lot, but that's our job to try to work towards cultivating that, developing that. I think we have some young guys on our team that could become that. But in answer to your question, the growth, the progression needs to continue to occur. I think we've made some progress. We're definitely at the point where it's time to start playing some games, because I think one of the things that comes out of games is you get some real feedback on where are we at in a game situation as opposed to this breakdown drill in practice. So that'll be coming soon, and that'll give us a chance to gain experience and learn. And I'm sure there'll be some things that we feel like we got to really get better at in a hurry, and then we can continue to address those things.
Ricky on the front left, please.
Shaka, in terms of scoring, do you have an idea that, maybe this is the 1 or 2 guys we can count on to score consistently night in and night out, or do you see that as something that'll change game to game?
That's a good question. I think we've got a variety of guys that can score if they're put in the right positions by their teammates and by our coaching staff. So that's what we're trying to create. We need our guards to understand, part of your job when you're playing point guard is to get guys shots and to put guys in position where they can score. Isaiah was pretty good at that. He did a nice job of that last year for our team. We've got to get better at that. But, to answer your question, I think when we look at scoring, it starts with trying to get the ball inside and trying to play fast in transition. So if we can create some baskets in transition with athleticism and quickness, that's a good thing. If we can get the ball inside and play through those guys, I think that can be a good thing for us. And then from there, I think we can have pretty balanced scoring if we're willing to do those two things. So we've really been pounding that into our guys' heads.
Chip on the far front right, please.
Shaka, as far as the leadership, what were when you asked him whose voices, on this team do you respect, what were the answers? And don't you need leadership from the point guard position? And would Kerwin be the most likely since he's been around? And has this rules violation hurt that?
Well, it's hurt that in that he hasn't been on the court for a few of our competitions. Now he's practiced, and he's been very, very good in practice. And, Kerwin is a guy that is you're starting to see in practice. We're starting to see examples of him showing leadership, whether it's as a point guard or just as a teammate. And he's much more comfortable using his voice to either encourage teammates or hold guys accountable. It takes time. It's a process, but he's so much further along than he was last year in that way. But, to answer your question, it would be the ideal would be you have a point guard that runs the team, calls the shots, tells guys what to do. The guy I was referring to at VCU, he was that. But, you know what, if you got a big guy that's a great leader, you'll take that too, because something about big guys, when they open their mouth and speak up in front of the team, it tends to carry more weight. I guess maybe because they're big and strong, scary sometimes, like Shaq. I mean, I think guys could be afraid of what Shaq could do to them. But in terms of who carries the most weight, that's still something that we're figuring out. I think as of right now, it's somewhat spread out amongst the team. I think those guys really respect Shaq and Kendall as seniors, guys that have been around here the longest. And then from there, it's somewhat spread out.
Kirk on the far left, please.
Yeah, Shaka, with this group, what do you think the biggest thing that's going to take them the longest to mature and grasp? Is it defense? Is it ball security, teamwork?
That's a great question. And I think the biggest thing, and this isn't really a basketball X's and O's thing, but it goes into all that stuff, is these guys figuring out how much as a team, as players, they need each other. I mean, it's universal, really. I mean, look at other teams and other sports, and but when you have a group of young guys, especially for our freshman guys that were kind of the center of everything in their high school world, our sophomore group that they came in here last year as freshmen and had some good experience, but now they're in such a different role. Those guys just learning how much they need each other, and they've taken a lot of steps in that area in practice. The interesting and exciting thing for me to watch is going to be once we get into real games starting on Friday, now you have all the things that you want to do individually as a player, all the things that people around you want you to do, from scoring to the way you're perceived to, shots, playing time, all those things. Can you make what goes into winning and the guys around you more important than all those things? I know it sounds simple, but that's the biggest challenge for these guys at 18, 19, 20 years old.
Back on the far right, please.
Coach, it seems like last year you put teams in the bonus in halves pretty early with such a young team. What are you going to do to try and limit that this season?
Foul less. It's a fine line, and particularly early in the season, the officials are always giving these points of emphasis going into the year, be it, post play or illegal screens or travels. And so we show our guys the officials video. We have officials come into practice at least 2 times a week. And I think that's been good, having those guys in there, because in practice, if you don't have officials there, guys kind of beat the crap out of each other. And you try to call it as you're coaching, but you're trying to coach at the same time. So that's been good when we've had officials in. It's just a fine line, and you got to figure out very quickly how a game is being officiated, because we all know, depending on the game, they may let you do more or they may not let you do as much. And with a young team, that is a challenge because they maybe have less of a feel for adapting to the officials, but that's something that we've got to work with them on and we've got to teach them. I think particularly with our emphasis of throwing the ball inside, we've got to be really careful with our post play. We want to post hard, we want to seal hard, but we don't want to foul. So it's a fine line. I think those guys are learning. They're definitely getting a lot of work in on that end of the floor when we break down with our bigs on that area. We just got to adjust depending how the game's called.
Time for 2 or 3 more. Brian in front.
Chuck, a schedule question. How disappointed are you that you're not opening the year in Cambodia or Kazakhstan or someplace like that?
I'm just, last year at this time we were over there touring Alibaba.
All right, hold on.
I mean, we literally were.
Right.
But, if we just could have done that trip a week in advance, I think it would have been a lot better.
Right.
There was a football game at the beginning of the season. I think it was Cal. Berkeley played someone, and they played in Australia, and they were allowed to play a week early. Sometimes the NCAA gives those kind of exemptions. I think that would have changed everything, but it was just tough in our first year with all that. I don't want to rehash that, but yeah, we're glad to be opening up here.
Right.
It gives us a level of just normalcy in terms of routine as we start the year and as we get into, okay, here's how we prepare for games. Here's what we do 2 days before. Here's what we do the day before. Here's what we do on the game day. Here's what we do the next day. Last year, we weren't really able to start the year with that. So hopefully we'll be able to get into a routine, and guys can understand what goes into moving forward.
Right, and the schedule really is a very traditional schedule for what Texas fans are accustomed to. But when you look at non-conference, and the trips to New York, the trip to Ann Arbor is going to be big. What jumps out at you in December, or November and December, leading up to conference?
Well, a few things with that. Number one, you always try to schedule your non-conference schedule around, plan your non-conference schedule around the team you're going to have. The challenge is you don't necessarily know while you're scheduling exactly who's going to be on your team because of recruiting. As we know, a certain big fella we didn't know for a while. But one of the things you'll see is with some of the games that we'll play at home, a lot of these teams are better than maybe the casual fan might think just by going by their name. I know that sounds like a coach, but you'll see, when they come in here, and then based on the seasons that they have when they get into their own league. And then from there, we try to schedule some games that would be highly competitive for us in Michigan, in Arkansas, in Alabama, and we play Georgia in that Big 12 SEC Challenge. Obviously, this trip to New York. I'm excited to see, how our team responds. And again, it's so much about, can we take one game, do everything we possibly can to be as successful as we can in that game, but then just as importantly, really glean as much as we can from where can we improve offensively, where can we improve defensively, where can we carry over better, and try to grow from one game to the next.
Last one, Andrew in the back there, well, please.
Coach, obviously Allen and Banks had that connection, or a little bit of a head start to that connection. How much does something like that help with a young team at the early part of the season? And I guess how would you describe their connection in amongst, I guess, all the freshmen?
Well, those two have been a lot of fun to coach, and just really, really appreciative of the opportunity to work with James and Jarrett. And we've talked about how different they are from each other, but the fact that they really get along well. And I see those guys making major strides. As freshmen, they're gonna have their ups and downs. They are really going through the adjustment of what it means to come to work every single day and have to go through a hard practice, and then the feedback from that practice, whether it's statistically or video, and then getting ready to do it again. But I've been really pleased with those guys' attitudes, their approach. They're great to coach. They don't give you any type of issues with providing feedback from them. The reality is there's a lot of players right now in today's day and age that they mistake accountability for negativity, and I'm fortunate that those two guys do not. You're able to hold those guys accountable for a certain standard at which they want to play, and they know that you still believe in them. Now, I try to sometimes be over the top with, how positive I am about how they're doing in the areas that they are really doing well. But at the same time, it's my job to provide accountability, because if they want to become the best they can become, they're going to need to be pulled to that standard. But I'm excited about the progress they're making.
Thanks, gang. Appreciate it.